Hello, my name is Kelly Waymond. Welcome to the Silhouette YouTube channel. We've got a fun Father's Day craft for you today. We are going to make this Father's Day boutonniere. So it says Dad, and it's made with a sucker and a paper flower, so it's a fun project to make. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel so you're always up to date on our content that we release, and make sure that you put any questions or comments you have in the comment section. We are going to go ahead and talk about what supplies and tools you'll need. So for this project, we're going to use cardstock for the flower. So 2 shades of green are what I recommend. I'm going to use a medium green, and then you can choose some choice of either a bright solid colored cardstock or a pattern cardstock, something with 2 shades of green. We will use a pair of scissors. We will use a ball shaping tool, although that's not absolutely required if you don't have it. We're going to use the Silhouette scraper tool. We'll need some white glue and hot glue. You will also need some suckers, so like a Tootsie Pop or Blow Pop, something like that, and then a boutonniere pin if you want to turn this into a boutonniere for Dad to wear. We will be using the Silhouette Cameo, although it is small enough that you could cut it on the Silhouette Portrait. We'll use a cutting mat and a regular blade. So let's go ahead and go into the software. So here we are in Silhouette Studio. We're going to be using 2 different designs today. We will start with the flower design. So I'm going to go into the library, and this design is number 60008. It's called 3D flower, but if you type 3D flower into your search bar, you are probably going to get a lot of different designs because there's a lot named 3D flower. But this one in particular is great for the sucker. It looks a little bit like a succulent, so you can cut it in green, but it's design 60008. So we'll go ahead and double click to open that. And first of all, we'll ungroup the design. So I'll just right click and ungroup. And we are not going to use these spiky centers. So I'm going to select those and just hit delete on my keyboard. So we won't be using those. Now we're going to use, just to make this easier to stick our sucker stick through these pieces, we're going to create a circle center. So over here on the left, we've got some drawing tools. We're going to choose the ellipse and select that, and then as I click and drag and hold my shift key, that's going to keep it as a perfect circle. And we want the circle to be 0.150 inches. So if you get it close, then we can just go up to the scale tool, make sure that it is in the locked position, and we'll just take either the width or the height and type 0.15 and hit enter, and that will make it our correct size. So now we need this circle to be, here let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. We want this circle to be in every one of these petal pieces. So the quickest way for me to do that is leave this one that we drew alone, or leave it here, and I'm going to hold my Alt key, or it would be an Option key if you're using a Mac, and just click and drag a copy over. So hold the Alt or Option key and click and drag a copy of each circle, or a circle over to each petal, and we'll get these aligned in just a second. I just want to get a circle into each one of them. And then the last one, I can just drag the original circle over. Okay, now sometimes it's hard to get something centered when you are working with a triangle shape. So usually when you're taking 2 objects and you want to center them perfectly with each other, you choose this option in the quick access toolbar that says center. But when you're working with a triangle shape, it doesn't behave that way. So I'm just going to eyeball it. Now if you see these little blue lines pop up, these are your smart snapping tools. And in this case, I think I might want to turn those off. So I'm going to go to the second tab of my page setup panel. It should be open when you start a new document, but you can open that panel up here, upper right. I'm going to go to my second tab, and I want to uncheck this box that says Enable Smart Snapping. And then I can not have those little blue lines show up. Sometimes they're very convenient, and sometimes they get in the way. So you can just toggle those on and off with your little checkbox here. So we want to get these circles pretty close to the center. And if you're off by a millimeter or two, you're not going to notice. So close enough is good enough. And you can always nudge with your arrow keys also. Just have that object selected, and you can just use your arrow keys on your keyboard to move it a tiny bit. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So while I have these open, I'm going to go ahead and drag across the whole thing to select them, and then right click and choose Group. That way those circles will stay in place with their petal shapes. Okay, I'm going to go back to the full page, the Fit to Window button, and I'm going to open my other design we're going to use. So back to the library, and this design ID number is 323254. And if you're looking in the design store for this design, you can also type that number in the search bar in the design store so you can purchase it. So this is a Dad accordion fold card, and we're not going to use it as a card, we're going to shrink it down, but it's 323254. All right, so we'll double click to open that, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Those are all connected, so I'm going to drag them off to the side. Now I want to use, well, I want the whole thing to be a certain size. Right now it's over 11 inches wide, and I know the width that I want that fits pretty good with the sucker. And so I'm going to change the width while these are all still grouped and selected. Up here again with your scale on the quick access toolbar, make sure that's locked, and we're going to set the width to 2.6 inches wide. And that'll shrink it all together at the same time so everything stays in the right size relative to each other. So then we can ungroup it. So right click, ungroup, and we're going to zoom in again with my little drag over to zoom. I'm going to zoom in on just this light blue Dad. I'm going to get rid of those perforations. This is small enough that we can fold it if we want to. Those perforations are not really necessary for how we're going to use the design. So right click, ungroup, and then I can select just those perforation lines. Click around till I find it. There we go. And then hit delete because I don't need those. Okay, and that was with the welded piece. You don't have perforations in this other one. So let's look at the full page again, and I'm going to be cutting this from a letter size. I'm going to be cutting these from a letter size piece of green cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that fits on a letter size piece of paper. So over here in the first tab of the page setup panel, make sure you have your correct machine and mat selected. And then my media size, I'm going to switch to letter. And just so I know I have enough space, I'm going to change the orientation to a landscape orientation. And so I can make sure that that fits. And you can drag that over so you're maximizing your space, and you'll have leftovers that you can use for another project. So the other thing we're going to cut with this medium green is this welded Dad shape. So drag that over. That's going to be our background piece for these two layers of the Dad. Oops. And I will just leave that close and not overlapping the other shapes. And then these letters over here, we're going to cut from a lighter green paper. And I can actually go ahead and change my mat so I know this is correct. If I put a piece of letter size paper on my mat right now, I know that I have room for all of this. So if I switch to a 12 by 12, then I could put the bright green paper down a little lower. So let me turn on let's change my transparency so I can see. I know I have to be at least 8.5 inches down. So I'll just put these at the 9-inch mark. My little grid, that's 9 inches. And so as long as I put my extra piece of paper, my brighter green, below the 9-inch mark, I know that I can fit those letters on there and cut it correctly. Now these little tiny pieces, those, if you want to cut them, you don't have to. If you want to cut them, you'll need to be careful because they're so tiny, but those also have individual pieces that you can divide off and cut out of different cardstock or material. That's how you would cut those. But for now, for this project, we are just going to do the dark or medium green and then our bright green. So we'll go to the Send tab. And I want to make sure that my settings are correct. I'm going to set it to a medium weight, 65-pound paper. And so my fastest way is to choose pattern paper, medium, 65-pound. And then I will usually switch my blade depth to 4, but I like to leave my force on 30 and my speed usually at 5. I can see all of my bold cut lines are there, so those are going to cut as I expect. So now all I need to do is load my paper onto my mat, and then I'll click Send when I'm ready. All right, so here is our cutting mat. We'll save the liner for later. We'll just make sure that we put this medium green on the same way we had it in the software on our virtual mat. So that's the full letter size, and it's in a landscape orientation. And then, let's see, I think I'm going to choose this kind of cute pattern paper. So just make sure I have it below my 9, or right at my 9-inch line. And I know that those letters are less than 2 inches, so that should be good. And so I'll go ahead and get that loaded into the machine. I have my rollers adjusted all the way out to the furthest point on the Cameo 4 here, so I can have it hold my mat, line up my left edge with the guide here. Okay, and so now all I'll do is press Send in the software. All right, so that is done cutting. Just make sure that that cut all the way through. And it did. Okay, so now I can unload that, and we'll just pull these pieces off. Probably a little easier flipping the mat over. Just carefully peel those off. Try not to bend or tear anything as you're working with these petals. They have all these divisions here that if you're going too fast, it's easy to rip them. All right, so there's our petals. And then we've got the dad background piece. And then we have our individual dad letters. All right, so let's drag this over here as a little example. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is with our scissors, we could have set this up in the software just like we did these circles. We could have drawn little slit lines, but in the end, it's a lot faster to just grab a pair of scissors and cut like a little, I don't know, maybe about a 1/4 inch. So you're cutting away from the circle up towards the tip of the petal. This will just help our sucker to slide on a little bit easier instead of tearing. So completely possible. And maybe if you were making a lot of these, you would spend the time in the software to draw little straight lines as cut lines. But if you're just doing one, the scissors is faster. And then once we have these little slits cut, kind of gonna arrange these in order by size so we can slide them on correctly. All right, so we've got smallest to largest. And then these two are about the same size, I think. Yep, those two are the same size. And then you've got this unusual piece. This is actually the first one we're going to use. So you can either use your scraper tool, and we're going to be curling these all the same direction. So you're just kind of dragging against, kind of like if you're curling ribbon with scissors, you're just putting that pressure between the paper between your thumb and your tool. We can do that with all of these. We want all the petals to go the same direction. If you were trying to make this more realistic, there are other things you would do. You could add, you know, veining or creases or different colors. If you've seen my other flower classes I've done, you'll see these other techniques. But since this is just going on a sucker and we assume it's going to be probably thrown away for Dad to be able to eat the sucker, we're not going to spend the extra time making these look super realistic. Okay, now besides being able to use the scraper tool, you can use a steel ball shaping tool that'll get even more curl into these. So it's good to have a soft surface when you're using a steel ball shaper tool, and you're just going to kind of roll either end, any size. It's just going to add more defined curl right there in the center. So we want this to kind of wrap around our sucker, so just do that for the center piece. And totally optional if you have one of these. It's really fun for paper flowers. All right, so now we'll go ahead and grab a sucker, and we're just going to slide it through that hole. Slide it up there. Now these will mostly stay in place. I'm not going to glue each individual letter or each individual layer. So we do this funny shaped one first that has all these extra petals, and then we'll go with the smallest. I should note that I have added a piece of Scotch tape at the base of this wrapper so it slides on easier. So when you're putting your petals on, you don't want the petals to stack right underneath each other. So you want to kind of have the next row filling the gap from the row above it. Just a general thing to be aware of when you're doing paper flowers. It just makes it look more full. So we'll just slide each of these on. You look a little bit from the top to kind of see if that's looking full. And then this very last one, we will go ahead and add some hot glue. Just a little dab at the base of the flower that's there. Finish sliding that up. All right, so now we will make these little, it wants to pop up. I'll go ahead and do the little bend. If you have pliers or just get a good grip on it, you can bend it slightly towards you. So it's going to be a boutonniere that can actually be pinned on, and that may or may not help it from rolling away. Nope, this one's going to go upside down no matter what I do. Okay, so the dad is really easy. You're just going to glue the letters on that belong to the letters below it. So just a little bit of white glue, or you could use an adhesive runner. The smaller your pieces are, the more I like to use just a needle tip glue applicator. Just a little bit of glue so it doesn't get too soggy. And this, it might even be fun to use this full card. You know how it opened, it's actually a card design, and it might be fun to make a matching card that's the full size to give with the sucker. And then this design actually comes with these little miniature tools, but you could use the design store, check out other designs that would look fun. If you do choose to cut them in miniature, or you can pick some other design, they can just be glued on. You know, there's all sorts of different themes depending on what your dad or your husband likes. Tools are popular in my house, so I chose the tools that happen to come with that card. All right, so then the last thing, or almost last thing, is you're just going to leave just a little bit of a gap there so you have room for the pin, but use your hot glue gun to just add some to the back of the letter A, just right there in the center. That can be glued to the stick. So make sure it's bending towards you. You can hot glue that. And then make sure that you've got a good pin that you can use to attach that to Dad's clothing. And I tested it, and it is not too heavy, so it's just a fun boutonniere for celebrating Dad. So I hope you enjoyed this project. It's a quick and easy one, fun for the kids to get involved. It's just really fun for Father's Day, so I hope you enjoy it. Make sure that you, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below, and we will see you again next time.